Right, so time for a review of basic Premiere functionality, right? When I opened up Premiere, I actually went to File, Open Recent, and opened up a recent project. If you do not have a project yet, this will come in blank, and you would say File, New Project, and you would create a new project to work with. One of the things you want to do also is make sure that you have everything in a folder. So for example, I have a folder here called Premiere Assets, and everything, all the assets that I've pulled in here are in here, and I can even make sure that this project gets saved in that folder instead of, this is the default, right? I broke it on purpose. It's going to my storage, my name, documents, Adobe permit, like that's buried pretty deep in a very useless place. So I always make sure to put everything in the same folder so I don't lose it. There we go. That's a more useful place to store that. So when you have a project going in Premiere, the canvas you're using is called a sequence, right? That's what this is down here with the timeline, and the visual shows up in the top right hand corner, as opposed to a composition in After Effects or a stage in Flash or a PSD file in Photoshop, right? It's a different type of canvas. You can see that there are tracks, not layers. So if I want to, if I add something, right, I can add it to the same, what looks like a layer as other clips. So multiple things can exist on the same track, but I use the second track in case I want to have any sort of fade in effects or anything like that. All right, so more on that later. Other basic layout issues, if you are double clicking on something just to look at that one clip and not the whole sequence, it's going to show up here. This top left hand corner is not your sequence. It is not the thing that is going to show up eventually when you render. This is just so you can look at one individual clip and kind of take a look and see what's going on there. This, if you do any editing in here, you're not gonna it's not gonna necessarily show up there. So be careful of that. And let's see, and then this down here in the bottom left hand corner, this is your it's called the project tab, but it's basically your folder of stuff, right? So I've got it all separated into folders. So I've got some stills here, I can put them in if I want. Have this little pie thing. I have all sorts of ridiculous movie clips from various silly places in here. You can see I drag them in here. If you want to add to it, you can actually just double click in here or file import, and it goes to the last place you imported stuff from, and I can bring in, you know, something new, and it shows up here. And you can kind of handle this the way you handle a lot of things where, you know, you can take a look at them. There we go. Can give you information on all of your clips, so I can tell, for example, that these are at a different frame rate than this HD video stuff. And also you can, let's see, if I right click, properties. So this tells me the resolution, the frame rate, the file size, the compression format, all the audio stuff, the length of it, pixel. There's more information than you probably even know about right now, but this will tell you what kind of video you're dealing with. Now you can see here that these different videos all have different sizes to them, and I'm going to show you how to make something small fill the whole screen in a second. But when you're creating something, you need to figure out what the basis is, like what is the main size you're dealing with, and then have other things match it. So for example, I have some very large HD video in here. That's my main video size. All this other stuff that gets added, I need to make it match this, because theoretically this band stuff would be the bulk of what I was showing. So in order to create a sequence that matches that, because your sequence can be any size, it can be any frame rate, what you can do is you can select the piece of video that is indicative of what you've shot, right click, new sequence from clip, and it's going to create a sequence that is exactly the size and frame rate and everything of that clip. If I don't want an HD video one, like let's say everything I'm doing is just going to be, you know, this old-timey stuff from my one digital book, I can click on one of those, new sequence from clip, and you can see this is a lot squarer, right? This is much smaller resolution. It's a different frame rate. This sequence matches this footage. And if I was to try and put any band footage in here, it's gonna look like this, right? It's cropped. You know, I have to figure out how to fit it in there properly. If you're working from stills, if you don't have any video and you're just putting together stills, then you're going to have to make a sequence from scratch. So I can go to new, sequence, and the default is something from the old days of DV cam, those weird small tapes that went into a camcorder. That's not going to help you very much. It's not a very good thing to start working with. So if you're looking for just standard HD video settings where everything's just going to kind of work, it's going from here on the computer to a video that'll be on the computer, a good preset is XDCam EX, not the other two. XDCam EX 1080p, that's P means progressive, it's how the lines scan in, just a good one. And then 24 frames a second. And these settings are like good standard HD video settings, and you can even name your sequence like photos, slideshow, and I hit OK, and it's blank, there's nothing in it, but I could, there we go, right, I could start to put together a slideshow of my fantastic cat photography or whatever, and I would know that this video size is an okay video size for whatever I'm doing. Alright, so now that we've got video sizes up, we've got to deal with the fact that not everything you put in a video is going to be the same size. So how do we make this better? Over here in the top left hand corner, besides having the source video, you also have effects controls. And even before you put any effects on there, there are things in here that are going to be relevant. So the top one, every piece of video has this. It's called FX Motion. And you twirl down the little caret, that means you click on it. And you'll see here there's scale and position. And if I click on the scale number and just scroll to the side, nothing happens because I'm on the wrong clip. I don't know why that got selected. Hold up. Let's undo. That's what we want. There we go. And you'll see it scaling up here. Now, obviously, different videos, especially if they're older, they're squarer than the aspect ratio from the HD video. So, how to deal with it? Well, sometimes a good solution is to have just like a still image that's got a bit of a gradient on it that vaguely matches the color of your old video. So, I would take something similar to this cream background, make a nice little gradient to go along the outside so I didn't have black bars there, because black bars is a pretty significant change from like full video to black bars. You know, you can kind of, that's one of the solutions. A more professional solution, you'll see it on the news all the time when they have square footage or awful iPhone footage that's vertical, that kind of thing. They'll have a copy of the video that is blurred out. And it's the edges of the video here and here, because the motion on the edges will then be the same, the color will be the same. It's usually tamped down in saturation a little bit. So if you're really into the effects in here, you can try doing something like that. Alright, so you can deal with the scale in this panel. You can also deal with the position if you wanted to, if for some reason, if we go to this one, this is the one I made. It was smaller. It was based on this old little lightning video that's like 480 by something. And obviously this band footage is way too big. So if I double click on it and I come here and I can scale it down, but only until the vertical is matching. But obviously there's a lot of horizontal length to choose from here. So I can take the X, and I've got a ways to go before I'm off the page. So I can kind of pick which section of this, let me turn off the audio here. There we go. I can pick which section of this video is more interesting in this square format, right? Like which part of the edges do I want to lose? So I would change the position here. You can also rotate it. I don't know why you would. Ignore the opacity thing. This is not where you would do fade ins and fade outs. All right, so that's how we can move things to fit properly. If you have photography, you are going to probably need to deal with the fact that it is a lot larger than even standard HD video. A lot of photography is large. It's huge. I think this photo, which is just a random cat photo from I don't know where. Yeah, you can see that even that is significantly bigger than the HD video. And you can see I've got a lot of vertical play. Photos tend to be squarer. They're a little bit taller than HD video. They've got a lot more vertical room to work with. So when you're showing off your photography, you have to decide, do I want to show the whole vertical space and have these bars, or do I want to fill the frame and not have the bars, but then, you know, lose a little bit of the photo? It might depend on the photo. It might depend on what you're trying to show off. All right, so let's see. The other thing you'll have to worry about when putting this video together is having fade-ins and fade-outs, right? So we can't just have things randomly overlapping, cutting off. Like, you need to actually have some transitions in here. So I'm going to take this little piece of video and I'm going to move it so that it overlaps with the edges. But you'll notice when I'm moving it a couple things. One, you'll see a little time box comes up and says, oh, that's minus 1 second and 10 frames. Remember that the first number on the right is frames. But I can't really get any smaller of an overlap than that. It keeps telling me it's like 1 second or 0 seconds. That's called snapping. Now that's handy if you're putting things in a sequence and they don't need to overlap. Not so handy when they need to overlap by tiny amounts. So if I go to, yes, sequence, I can turn off the snap. And now I can, I can overlap these things by, you know, exactly the amount I want. The other thing you might need to do is zoom your timeline in a little bit. These two bars down here will let you zoom in. It zooms in towards your time marker. So you want your time marker to be close to what you're focusing on. But the closer you are, the more you can, the more finesse you can have with moving this. So I can move these to be, hang on, I'm going to re-put it back to where it was. There we go. And then I want it to overlap by 20 frames. So now it is. Let's see. Now if I want any kind of, you know, fade in over the edge here, that tab, effects controls, are on the top left, but putting effects in the first place is on the bottom left. Let's see, video transitions, dissolve, cross dissolve, and I take it and I hover it over the edge of the clip. And it shows me how long it is. And one of the best ways to, for me anyways, to choose the right length for this is to actually just type it in here. Or in this case, I can scrub the values until it gets to 20 frames, because I know I overlapped it by 20 frames. You can also hover over like this and trim it the same way you trim video in the tracks. But I like exact numbers because I've set it up like that on purpose, right? And then if I watch it, oh, I forgot to mute. Oh, they unmuted. That's weird. There we go. So if we watch it, and nice little fade in. Small, but it's nice. Yeah, remember you can trim clips by just hovering over the edge, right? I can change it to whatever I want. It shows you up here. It gives you a preview of where it's ending. So I can know boring, crowd stuff, with the wall, and oh, there's the band. I can go all the way back to here and know what I'm cutting out and what I'm not. The other thing you may need to do, sometimes you need to excise like a middle section. there's a razor tool. This is the only other tool you should really be tinkering with right now, but it lets you cut the video, and then you can take out like the middle section, and then afterwards you can always trim, right, what's going on. So I've kind of taken out the zoom because he zooms out, the videographer. You know, maybe I don't need that weird awkward zoom when it goes from close to the band to far away from the band. Another thing you might occasionally need to do, well, you definitely need to deal with the audio a lot, but there's a couple different things that may crop up when you're dealing with the audio. For one thing, I can zoom into it the same way I zoomed into the video. Sometimes I'll just take this whole thing and drag it all the way up here. I don't need to see the video if I'm working on the audio. I just need to be able to see what's going on. I give myself more room in the timeline. I can also hover over the middle, and these video clips, I just need to see where they are and see what they're called. I don't need a lot of space for that. The audio is a different story. I need to be able to see like what is going on with these clips, and I need to be able to see these audio waveforms and certain other things. So we've got a video fade in here, but I need the audio to be doing the same thing. I need to be transitioning in audio from one place to the other. So I can go here. S on the keyboard should turn on snapping. So it'll help me find where I am. There we go. So I go there, and I know I'm at the right space on this top audio to tell it, okay, this is when you should stop being at your loudest and move down. And this bar that is through the middle here, and you can see my cursor changes, that's the volume level. Now I can turn up and down the volume on each channel. There we go. As a whole. That's actually not what I want to do. I want to have it's called envelope points in old-timey words. But basically I need keyframes that say this is where it stops being the loudest, and then going down to the bottom where it will be the quietest. It's a little bit of a trick to get that to show up. For one thing, I need to go over, these are keyframe buttons. The one on the far left, you have to click on it to say show keyframes, track keyframes, volume. And I have to turn that on for both tracks. And then I can click this little button right here for both tracks and say make a keyframe. And then I can go down here to the very end, click the little button in the middle to make new keyframes, and drag those keyframes down. These things are not connected because sometimes you need to, channels left and right need to be different. They don't track the same, right? So if you've got two audio tracks or something, you're going to have to do, both, and you're going to have to pay attention. Likewise on this one, now that I'm at the end of this clip, I got to turn on track keyframes volume for both of them. Then I can add new keyframes. So these are now pegged to being at their default volume. And I go back to the beginning. I add two new keyframes. There we go. And there it is. Infinite negative decibels means there's no sound. That's what those numbers mean when I'm scrubbing these up. You can see it's -5, -10, negative infinity. Negative infinity means there's no sound. All right, but now if I didn't have these on mute, because it can't record the sound anyways, but one will fade down while the other fades up, and so you won't have any popping. And if any of your video has audio like this, it needs to have that fade out at the end of every clip, even if there's nothing else. So I have this here, even if there's no transition to something else. Maybe it's the end of the video, or it's transitioning to some whole other piece of music, but it's not, it's just kind of stopping. This kind of abrupt, let me move this a little, stop is going to pop, right? Whenever you can see all of these levels, the waveform is up, and then it goes down to nothing, it just cuts off, you're going to hear that. It's going to sound horrible. So even if it's only a few frames long, you don't want to hear a fade out, you do need to put in keyframes there. And there we go. And help with that. Not have any popping going on. Alright, so I'm gonna zoom this. Nope. There we go. Back out, get myself this room again. So those are your basic tools. There are other video transitions. Some people are having fun because their videos are a little less serious, so they're putting in Venetian blind wipes and radial wipes and things like that. Think like Star Wars transitions, those kind of things. Other people are keeping it really simple with cross dissolves because they're putting together a little bit of a more formal video. So it all depends on what you're making, how you're going to put it together. But when you're done, first of all, you should save more often than I just did because I haven't saved since I started talking. And then the other thing is that you would export. So you go File, Export, and make sure you have your sequence selected, otherwise it doesn't let you. There it is, Media. And it's going to actually open up this new window here, and it's going to use Windows Media Encoder through Premiere. And your format at the school is going to default to AVI, right? This right here, it'll be defaulting to this one. You don't want that one. It's going to be a zillion megabyte file. You want H.264. H.264 is basically the YouTube compression, so it's pretty good compression. Output name. Theoretically, if you're handing this in to me, you're going to have your name on it, right? So your last name, and then you can call it, promo video, whatever you want to call it. Hit save. And all the rest of these settings should be fine for our purposes. And hit export. Now, if what you render for me is a really large file, like 100 megabytes or something, which isn't huge when it comes to HD video, but it's not small for handing into, Blackboard. Don't hand it in to me through Blackboard. Come to class on, the next day and say, I have a file, and I will make sure I have my flash drive with me, right? Because we need to make sure that you can hand it in, but if you're sitting there waiting for, Blackboard to upload it, upload speeds are slower, that can take a while, and I don't want to have to download lots of 100 megabyte files because that's going to take forever. But you can see here how slowly this is rendering for the first part, and then it jumped a little bit. I think that was the black space in between videos. This estimate is not the best. It's based on what it's rendering currently. So if your whole video is exactly like the thing it's currently rendered, then it's going to take 43 more seconds. If, however, you eventually get to a lot of black space and there's nothing there, then it's going to take less time to render. Likewise, it's ignoring the fact that you might have some point in the video where there's 14 different layers and 72 effects going on. So don't trust that. You're going to have to learn how to just look at your videos and know, what's going to take a while, what's not. My promo video ended up at 141 megabytes. I will not be putting this to Blackboard. I will be handing it in to the teacher on a flash drive. If you need to do that, make sure you tell me so I know that. All right, so those are the basics of Premiere to hopefully get you started.